Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nairika, and I'm going to be talking about the congenital malformations in the green sea turtle embryos, Chelonia, that we've seen in the Lhaviyani Atoll. So this work was done in collaboration with the Atoll Marine Center, which is a small locally run NGO. It was established in 2012 by a Maldivian NGO from the island and has been running locally since then. The Atoll Marine Center hosts a veterinary clinic with a resident vet since the last few years. We work especially with sea turtles, but have also had flamingos, birds, cats, and a number of other animals coming into us. We also do a turtle rehabilitation project. This is done on land with tanks, and it's also done in the sea with a large sea cage that we've been fortunate enough to have and set up. The Atoll Marine Center, since the last few years, has been doing turtle monitoring, turtle nest monitoring in our partner resort, Kanhura. And this study is the results that has come from a few months of monitoring our turtle nest. Lhaviyani is located on the northeastern side of the Maldives. And Nairika is the capital island of Lhaviyani, and that's where our marine center is located. Our partner resort, Kanhura, is on the northeastern side of the atoll and comprises of 3 islands: the main resort island, Kanhura, and 2 other private uninhabited islands that we're fortunate to have. Most of these turtle nests that I'm going to be talking about are from our private island, Jehanura. So we begin our monitoring with a manual sunrise patrol. So the marine biologist walks around a 3.6-kilometer perimeter every morning looking for turtle nests. Once we find them, we identify the turtle tracks and try locating the nests, the egg chambers, and collecting relevant data on the tracks. And we then mark our nests and monitor them until we see signs of hatching. Once we see signs of hatching or emergence, we go on to the next step, the exhumation. This is done with all relevant permits from the Environmental Protection Agency. We've had our permits since August 2021, and the data is from August to December, the time I was with the Atoll Marine Center. 48 hours later, so we wait 48 hours from emergence until we begin our exhumation. We do this to give any hatchlings that are late or still in the nest a chance to leave naturally before we dig up the nest. We follow the Olive Ridley Project exhumation guidelines, and they're quite comprehensive. To give you a quick overview into what our process of exhumation looks like, 48 hours after we see hatching, so a dip where the egg chamber was, the marine biologists get to the location. We lie down almost vertically flat in the sand and use our hands to dig up the sand in the area. We use our hands and no tools because in case there are any live hatchlings or eggs that haven't hatched yet inside the nest, we don't want to damage them. So we need to feel and we need to be very gentle with our hands. Once we find fragments of eggs or any eggs in the chamber, we collect them out and we line them all up, count how many have hatched, how many haven't, to get relevant data on the depth of the nest and so on. And then we proceed to open up the unhatched eggs that we find. We do this in order to collect data on the developmental stages of the turtle embryos, and we see a wide variety of different developments. So I'm going to be talking about 7 nests that I exhumated over the 3 months that I was there. And these nests had a different hatching success rate. Some of them were high in the early 90s, while some of them had really, really low hatching success rates. One of the nests had only 1 egg that actually hatched from the entire collection. And we're going to try and look into why this happened and what we saw in the nest that did not do so well. So to start with, 3 of the nests did very well. They were a success, and we're happy about those. We're not going to talk about them. They did well. We're happy for them. The nests that did not do so well are the ones that concerned us. And we're going to club these into 2 main groups, C and E, with their really low hatching are in one group, and F and G are in the other. What we saw with nest C and E was EED, or early embryo mortality, where in the very beginning of their incubation period, these eggs and their life came to a halt. So there was no development of an embryo as such, and they ended at a very early period. Inundation during the first few days is very critical to the turtle eggs. According to a study that we've seen in Northern Australia by Wadhati Atoll, we've seen that the first 20% and the last 20% of the incubation period is the most sensitive period. During other times, the eggs can handle up to 6 hours of submergence, but during the first 20 and last 20%, any inundation can be seriously damaging because the turtles need to have air exchange between the inside and the outside. The other two nests, the nest F and G, which had a slightly successful hatching rate, is an instance where we saw compounded flooding. Compounded flooding is 2 or more forms of inundation. This can happen terrestrially and coastally. So on a terrestrial basis, you'd look for things like the water table, high levels of rain. On a coastal system, we look for high tides, spring tides, storm surges, and inundation. So from the 4th to the 9th of November 2021, we saw an event of compounded flooding in the Lhaviyani Atoll, and a nest that we excavated at that time, which was 18 meters above the high tide line, looked like this. The very
So
top
this
of the
nest,
egg chamber
nest
had water
28,
all the way
water
up
right
to
from
the
the very
sand.
top of the egg chamber.
And
Don't
as
know
you
how
can see,
recently
when
it gotten. We had a
dug
high tide
into
on
the nest,
Saturday
it's almost
last,
like
3 days back.
digging into a bowl of soup. There was just water everywhere. We found bits of eggs in between the water, and it was really difficult to exhumate this nest.
Yes! No, that's yolk. So
we did see a number of congenital malformations. Congenital malformations are basically any deformities that you see during the embryonic phase of the turtles before they hatch. And in the nest F and G, we saw a number of these eggs were in stage 2 and 3 of their formation. Isha, who's coming up next, is going to be talking a bit about the different developmental stages in turtle hatchlings. So we're going to go deeper into the different stages in her presentation. So we saw these developmental deformities mainly in these two nests, which were affected by the compounded flooding. And the embryonic period, that when we saw the deformities, happened to coincide with the time that we saw the compounded flooding. Since it's just two nests, we don't have any conclusive data to say that it was the compounded flooding that caused any of these malformations, deformities, but it's just a coincidence that's happened. And further research into this would definitely be interesting. Getting into the malformations we saw, one of the rarities that we saw was this little infertile egg. Most turtle eggs are the size of a golf ball. This egg was smaller than my nails. And when we opened it, there was no yolk in it. It was just albumin. Infertile eggs are relatively common in leatherback nests, but green sea turtles rarely see infertile eggs. One of the most common deformities we saw in our nests, especially in nest F and nest G, was anophthalmia, a deformity or lack of eyes. A lot of these embryos did not have eyes or had really deformed eyes. One of our embryos had amelia, or missing limbs, where two of the limbs on this little guy were completely missing. And another embryo that we saw from one of those nests that had hatched and actually was alive had his frontal forelimbs dysfunctional. So you can see he's trying to use his hind limbs to live, was unable to get quite far, and he was eaten by a shark. One of the most interesting embryos that we saw during my time there was this particular little guy. When I first opened the egg and I saw something white inside, I was quite confused because I didn't realize he was an albino embryo. He was in stage 3 to 4 of his development and still had a large yolk sac attached to him. Apart from being an albino, this turtle had other deformities as well. The scutes on his back are not normal. Most green turtles have 5 vertebral or central scutes down the center. Here we see polynumerary, which is more than the number there should be. There are 8 vertebral scutes, and they are not properly aligned. Usually in green turtles, these scutes are very neatly arranged. Over here, we see asymmetrical staggering of the vertebral scutes as well. This little guy also had another abnormality. His jaw was crossed, so latogonathia or crossed jaw. And here we have another close-up that you can see of his weird little jaw. So this is it for the congenital malformations we saw in the 3 months of excavation. We're sure with further studies in the area, we would see a lot more unusual deformations. I'd like to thank the marine biologists and volunteers from the Atoll Marine Center who were with me during my excavations. They were really, really helpful. Kanhura and the staff of Sundive Center, who was extremely lovely and helped me dig up some of the nests. The ORP team, especially Isha and Emily, who were always there on video call, helping me with all my doubts. And this big mama turtle over here, this is the turtle whose nest had the particular albino embryo and most of the deformed embryo. So I'd like to thank her for all the data she laid out for me. Some of the references that I used. Thank you for your attention. If you have any questions, I'd love to take them.